Hello everyone, this is DeClue Bach, Richard DeClue, for another episode. It's been a couple weeks. I was on vacation last week, but really didn't have time or the ability to do any videos during that time. But anyway, had another great day at my local parish where we have the traditional Latin Mass every week, and I'm glad to be back after having been out of town last week. Really missed my parish. Glad to be back there again this week. Today I kind of want to do somewhat of a crossover between my blog and my YouTube channel. So my blog has suffered from neglect the last few months. I haven't done a post in a few months. And I'm way behind on doing the next round of my Moral Theology blog posts. And so to help me get motivated to do that, I wanted to start doing some videos on what I had done on the blog already, especially with regards to moral theology. So this video will be at least a presentation of one of my posts on moral theology, my first one, which is on the nature of human freedom. And it's based on a paper that I wrote for a graduate course on Introduction to Moral Theology by Father Romano Cesario, a Dominican, who's a really well-known scholar. It was a great class. On my blog, I also mentioned this in my one of my theological journey posts. But please do check out my blog and not just this YouTube channel. It's Sapientia Nulliformis is the name of it, and it's on Wix site, W-I-X. And I'll put a link down to it below. And I'd like to have both formats, written word and talks, videos, as much as I can. And I do apologize, by the way, for these videos. I work around 50 plus or minus hours a week at my day job, which is in auto sales. So I don't have a lot of time between that job and finishing up my dissertation, which is I'm in the last stages of that, and family life to edit videos, to get better sound equipment. I don't have the funds for that. I don't have the time to edit and recrop and add things in. And quite frankly, even uploading the videos from my computer now takes a long time. I have kind of a slow internet connection, and my computer's probably not the most powerful for doing a lot of processing on these videos, so I apologize. I don't have time to right now to make them better. You know, if things progress, hopefully I can do more of that. I would like to for your sake. But for now, it is what it is. Feel free to help support my efforts if you are able. I'll put a link to my donor box account below. Also in the comments, let me know if you'd rather have me do Patreon. I've sort of avoided that for a couple of reasons, but some people have suggested maybe I should consider doing that, and that it might be a better arrangement for my viewers and myself. So if you think that might be the case, leave a comment below. Let me know if you'd rather see me do Patreon than donor box. Okay, so today's topic, Introduction to Moral Theology, Part 1, the nature of human freedom. Sorry, like the video skipped there a little bit. So I'm going to basically read this from my blog and see how this goes as a new format that I probably won't use very often because I'm not a big fan of reading things. And I'll probably interject things here and there, but use this as the basis. So, obviously right now, our contemporary society is extremely divided, and morality is one of those areas that divides it the most. And what's interesting about this division is a paradoxical union of relativism, which states that there is no absolute moral truth, and constant moral posturing. So on the one hand, we have a society that denies absolute moral truth, and yet we have all sorts of people doing virtue signaling and moral posturing about every possible topic you can imagine, and talk about how everyone else that doesn't agree with them is evil and wrong. And it's very curious, especially for those who are moral relativists who yet also proclaim some sort of moral superiority. Now, the lack of a common framework to discuss moral questions is lamentable because it perpetuates this constant division in our society. Now, I would also assert that at the same time that our society's capacity for rational moral discussion declines, our technological power is rising exponentially. That means we can do more without the concomitant ability to discern whether what we do is good or bad. In other words, there's a decrease in our ability to discuss moral questions as a society due to a lack of a common perspective or common principles or even a common philosophy or even, it seems, a basic knowledge of logic, which should be universal. So there's a decline in that, and then an upswing at the same time of actual power, what we can do, technological ability. So we're having a hard time discerning what's good or bad, but a greater ability to do things. That's, to paraphrase the character Malcolm from Jurassic Park, you were so busy thinking about whether you could that you never stopped to ask whether you should. With an increase in scientific knowledge and the associated technological capacity, a diminished capacity for moral clarity is a tremendous danger. We need a renewed understanding of what exactly morality is and how to engage in a process of moral reasoning. I'm sure, this video may only reach a few people, but just perhaps will help those few think more clearly about moral questions, and in turn, they too will help others think about moral questions. And I do emphasize think. That alone would be an improvement on the situation. Thinking is almost entirely left out of the equation in most discussions. A lot of them are just assertions of the heart or emotions, or mainly just expressions of indignation, no matter where they stand on an issue. It seems to be the most common thing you find on social media and those sorts of things. Even in the media, it's all just seems to be indignation. All right. Now, in this video, in the post that it's based on, so the post in this video, I am proposing the approach of moral realism. With this, I mean the idea that morality is connected to reality. It is a part of the fabric of real truth. This post takes as its starting point the term paper I wrote for my graduate level moral theology class, and the title of that paper was The Ontology of Human Freedom, which is basically a metaphysics of human freedom. It's a philosophical understanding of human freedom. And then I add to that some basic moral principles of Catholic theology and Thomistic ethics. By now, many of you are probably wondering, what the heck is ontology? Also referred to as metaphysics, ontology is the study of being. Catholic moral theology holds that there is a connection between being or existence and nature and essence with morality. So being or existence, nature, essence, those relate to morality. In other words, morality is real. It's not an illusory fabrication, and it is based on the very structure of human existence itself. It is bound up with the notion of human freedom itself. Thus, we will discuss human existence and nature as a precursor and precondition for a proper understanding of human freedom. Side note, I will use the term man here in the inclusive sense, like the German Mensch or the Greek anthropos or the Latin homo. It's a gender or sex neutral term. Okay, in English, it's the best thing we have. I don't like playing gymnastics with verbiage, trying to somehow, neuter it. It just, man works the best. It's not a statement about equality or anything like that. It's just, in English, flows the best. All right, so first, man is a creature. As a created being, as a creature, man has a creator to whom he owes his being, his existence. Man does not create himself. Thus, prior to his freedom, man is conditioned. Without being consulted beforehand, man is placed within a world that he did not create and is given a nature and an existence that he did not ask for. Right from the start, then, it is clear that man is dependent upon the way things are. And it is only within this reality, about which he has no say, that man exercises his freedom. Indeed, included in this truth is the fact that man does not determine for himself what it means to be human. Man is bound, whether he likes it or not, by truth, especially by the truth of his own existence. The truth about human nature, though, is a lofty one. Unlike the rest of creation, we are capable, at least in potency and in principle, of reason and choice, of knowledge and love, of intellect and will. This is what it means to be created in the image of God, to possess intellect and will. As such, this knowing and loving is precisely what man is made for. Achieving the purpose of one's being is where happiness resides, precisely because it is the perfection of something's nature to achieve the purpose of its nature. One cannot decide for oneself what will make one happy. It is built into one's own very essence. Man's happiness lies in his knowing and loving. Man's intellect is ordered towards the truth. His will is ordered towards goodness. In short, man's nature is designed for knowing the truth and loving the good. Ultimately, man is made for the knowledge and love of God, the supreme truth and the ultimate good. It is in knowing and loving God that man finds his perfect happiness. All other acts of knowing and loving only bring partial happiness insofar as they are conducive to this final end of man. John Paul II attests to this truth when he says that, quote, the moral life has an essential, teleological, that is goal-oriented, character. Hence, since it consists, let me redo that. The moral life has an essential teleological character, since it consists in the deliberate ordering of human acts to God, the supreme and ultimate end, telos, of man. It's Veritatis Splendor, number 73. So, teleological character. That means that the moral life has an end, a goal in mind. Okay, and God is the ultimate end of man. It is, and so there's a deliberate ordering of human actions to God and union with God. That's what that means. Thus begins our discussion of human freedom, which, as we have seen, has certain inherent limits or preconditions. It is only within this ontological, de facto framework that man exercises his freedom, which leads to very important implications about the meaning of the term freedom itself. There's a base level of freedom that really is better termed voluntariness. That's the ability to choose between two contraries or to act one way versus another. I can have vanilla, or I can have chocolate ice cream, or I can have swirl. I'm free to choose to act voluntarily. That's a precondition to freedom in the fuller sense, but it is not the fuller and deeper sense of human freedom. In the full sense, one is only free insofar as one voluntarily chooses to act in accordance with truth and goodness, and particularly in accord with the truth about the good. Father Servais Pincares, another Dominican, provides a great example to help us understand the distinction between the merely voluntary and the truly free. So we want to make this distinction between freedom as just doing what I want versus true freedom, or a higher form of freedom. He uses the example of a piano, and it's a very good analogy. Now, quote, of course anyone is free to bang out notes haphazardly on a piano as the fancy strikes him. But that is a rudimentary, savage sort of freedom. It cloaks an incapacity to play even the simplest pieces accurately and well. On the other hand, the person who really possesses the art of playing the piano has acquired a new freedom. He can play whatever he chooses and also compose new pieces. His musical freedom could be described as the gradually acquired ability to execute works of his choice with perfection. It is based on natural dispositions and a talent developed and stabilized by means of regular, progressive exercises, or properly speaking, a habitus. That's from the Sources of Christian Ethics, page 355. So again, if you don't know how to play the piano, you can still go up to the keyboard and just bang on the keys and sounds will come out. And you're free to do that. But that's a base sort of freedom, okay? It really is not full freedom. So if you learn how to play the piano well, you gain a new form of freedom, which is to actually be able to play things properly, well, and maybe even create new pieces of music. So this analogy suggests an intrinsic connection between freedom and virtue. Virtue is the ability to act well. It's a strength. It's an ability to do something well. Freedom, from this vantage point, is the capacity to live virtuously. It requires knowledge of moral goodness and a will strengthened by practice and aided by grace to choose to act according to the morally good. Okay. So, hearkening back to the acknowledgement that man is not the creator, the following quote from Veritatis Splendor is illuminating. Revelation teaches that the power to decide what is good and what is evil does not belong to man, but to God alone. The man is certainly free inasmuch as he can understand and accept God's commands. But his freedom is not unlimited. It must halt before the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for it is called to accept the moral law given by God. In fact, human freedom finds its authentic and complete fulfillment precisely in the acceptance of that law. To help our understanding, let's return to the piano analogy. The piano is designed in accordance with the laws of physics and acoustics. The lengths of the strings determine the wavelengths of the sound waves. I should say the lengths and the thickness and all that. The force of the striking of the strings, the thickness of the strings, all of these things are and more contribute to the sound of a piano. One cannot just make a piano without corresponding to the truth about the physics of sound and acoustics. One likewise cannot just pound away at the keys and declare the sound beautiful. True mastery must correspond to fundamental truths. Similarly, moral mastery must likewise correspond to the laws of morality and natural law. We can't just declare that we want to play however we feel like and declare ourselves musical equals to the likes of Beethoven or Bach. Likewise, we can't just declare moral relativism and claim no difference between sin and virtue, between vice and beatitude, between sinfulness and holiness, sanctity. Sure, man acts voluntarily when he chooses to act, even in sin. The free man is the one, however, who voluntarily chooses to act in accordance with the truth about the human good and enjoys doing so. The perfectly free man does so with ease. Truth, then, is indispensable for human freedom. As Jesus says, quote, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. The more you know and understand the truth, the freer you are to make a rational, good judgment to be put into action. Some vague notion of good intention is not enough. We need to know the truth. Another analogy might help. Let's say that there is a used car for sale. The price is set at $10,000. Now there's a mechanic and someone who knows nothing about cars who are both interested. Which one is more free to make a wise decision about whether the vehicle is worth the price? Of course, it's the mechanic. The well-informed person is the freer of the two. Likewise, in the moral realm, the more ethically educated person is the freer. Ignorance is not bliss. It does not make one free. If one wants to be truly happy, then one needs to seek the truth. This moral view is not a banal freedom from constraint, but a vivacious freedom for excellence. From the standpoint of some modern ethicists, law imposes rules upon us, thus seeking the limits of our freedom. Law is seen as the antagonist to freedom. Liberation then comes from freeing oneself from the rules. That's false, though. In truth, law and freedom are intimately connected. They are not supposed to be enemies, at least not when it comes to just laws. With respect to the natural law and the eternal law, also known as the divine law, law does not reduce or negate human freedom. It is the basis of human freedom. God, who alone is good, knows perfectly what is good for man, and by virtue of his very love, proposes this good to man in the commandments. God's law does not reduce, much less do away with human freedom. Rather, it protects and promotes that freedom. See Veritatis Splendor number 35. The Ten Commandments are not the arbitrary laws of a cosmic dictator. They are the loving wisdom of a loving Heavenly Father. This leads to another important point. One cannot be truly free if one remains ignorant. Therefore, it is a falsehood, and a grave one at that, to think that one can keep another person free by allowing them to persist in ignorance. If they are truly ignorant about the good, then they are incapacitated in relation to choosing the good, in which consists man's real freedom. You cannot let someone remain ignorant of the presence of poison in their food, let them eat it, and then act like you weren't complicit in their death, because you didn't want to impose your views on them. Likewise, we cannot remain silent about moral truths out of a false sense of respect for freedom. Don't confuse cowardice and a desire to avoid the backlash of proclaiming unpopular truths with love and acceptance. True love, as exhibited by Jesus on the cross, is the willingness to suffer for doing the right thing by the hands of those who hate us, out of love for those same people. Loving someone means presenting them the truth and encouraging them towards the good, even if they hate you for it. That is Christian love. In other words, happiness is found in fulfilling the purpose of one's nature, knowledge and love of truth and goodness. In the realm of morality, then, the truly free person is the saint, the one who knows the truth, loves the true, does the good, that is, enacts moral truth, enjoys doing the good, and abhors doing sin. True freedom comes from growth in virtue and beatitude and loving communion with God. Nothing else will suffice. Saintly freedom is the only real freedom, for it is the only freedom that corresponds to reality. The saint is the true man, the truly free man. So that's the intro, and again, I apologize for doing mostly reading. It's just part of my time constraints. But just to sort of recap, there are natural physical laws, right? At the Big Bang, the amount of matter present, the energy, the temperature, all of that actually played into the development of the natural laws as we know them. And if you've ever heard about the anthropic principle, very, very minute settings for all those factors were compatible with life as we know it. And even development of fundamental particles of matter. So those laws, the physical laws, are the place of our movements, the freedom of our movements, right? The way that things work. Gravity, all of those fundamental forces, even the strong and weak nuclear forces, the electromagnetic force, those things are there. We don't create them. They exist. We discover them, right? They're there. And they are the conditions, they are what make possible our actions in the physical world. And thus the condition of possibility for us in acting in the physical world. Okay. Similarly then, the laws of morality, moral law, the natural law, divine law, those things are what enable us to act morally. There's a truth about it. Before we even think about it, before we act, there is a truth about the good. And it's in knowing those laws that we can therefore enhance our freedom and finding ways of enacting them and to pursuing them. And so our freedom is really fully expressed when we know the truth about the moral law and engage in it properly and choose it. And it can be hard at first. The next video I believe is, let me check here, make sure. So anyway, there's stages from concupiscence to, concupiscence to continence to virtue. Okay, growing in the ability to do the good and to enjoy doing it. Sort of how at the beginning when you're trying on the piano it can be difficult. Some people pick it up more easily than others. Some have to slog at it and work their way and gain that ability over time. But the more you practice the virtues and the more you pray and open yourself up to the grace of God, the better able you are. And it can be like a roller coaster throughout your life. But, as one spiritual advisor once told me, it's okay if there's ups and downs as long as it looks like this. And over the long haul, you're going in the right direction. What you don't want is ups and downs that go this way, or even just stay stagnant. Over time, you want to grow in virtue, in beatitude. And so that's the reality of it. And so we need to have a greater ability to start discerning the truth about the good and then enacting it. But the main point of this introductory video is to establish the fact that there is a truth about the good that needs to be known in order to act well. And without the ability to reason morally, we can't even have discourse with one another, let alone enact it. And so the subsequent videos and my other blog posts will speak to those a little bit more. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. We need moral ontology. We need a metaphysics of human freedom and of morality if we're to overcome these impasses and the constant just dissonance and of moral posturing without any real basis or ability to even think straight. And again, I think a big part of it is a lack of metaphysics in the philosophical sense, a lack of ontology. We've started to just deny basic truths about being, and it's really sad. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's where we're at, and I think that's why philosophy is so important, logic as well as metaphysics. And I think that Aristotelian Thomistic metaphysics is the best that history has provided, and that's I think we need a revival of that if we're to overcome a lot of the problems today and to think rationally again about moral questions. So that's my 2 cents. I know it wasn't the most exciting video, but there's a lot of important concepts in here. I hope you can pull them out. I'm used to talking in front of crowds and giving talks in person. I find it really difficult to speak to myself using a camera on my computer. It's not what excites me. It's not how I get, most of my good talks throughout my life have been in person. Anyone who's seen those can attest to that. Much better in person giving talks to groups than this sort of format, but it is what it is. It's my constraints. Hope you can appreciate them for what they are, and I hope it helps in any way that it can. Thanks. God bless.